If you are somebody listening to this and you've ever doubted what you believe you are capable of, I don't say this lightly when I say this, that I don't believe you're ever going to listen to another podcast by me, which is going to violate any limiting beliefs of what you believe you're capable of. I'm absolutely delighted with this episode of the Kirk Miller Podcast to bring on my first ever guest. In terms of introducing this man, I don't really know where to start really, and he's going to share this within his story, but it's Dr. David Smith MBE, what I've just been corrected. But I've come across a lot of people in my life who I've either trained with, been mentored by, or just simply come across in any form of life. And I don't say this lightly when this man facing me now, David Smith, is without question the most inspirational human that I've ever been fortunate enough to meet. We've only known each other, what is it now, Dave, for a matter of months, but I was first connected to David through one of my clients when I sort of put out to my Built to Last clients that was looking for speakers basically who were going to be inspirational, had a great story, who could add value to ultimately the mission of the Built to Last community and program, which is to elevate performance, mindset, standards. And one of my clients mentioned David Smith MBE. I did some digging, and his story before I even spoke to him blew my brains. And then when I spoke to him, I was just in awe. So I'm absolutely delighted, David, mate, that you've given up your time today to share your story. Just to be transparent, guys, with me bringing on guests now and a man of David's stature, one thing I never wanted to do was be scripted, anything staged. If you listen to any of my podcasts so far, I want to speak from the heart, raw, real, and I think that's why me and David get on so well, and why David has made a monumental impact in anyone who's ever spoken to, anyone who's ever been fortunate enough to listen to him. It's real, it's raw, and I know you're going to get enormous value today from David. Just the way this man thinks, what he's had to go through, would break 99.9% of people. And I know David's a very, very humble man, so I will champion him as much as I believe this man deserves. But David, first and foremost, mate, I want to thank you too for your time, and to welcome you to the Kirk Miller Podcast, the first ever dual one.
No, thank you, Kirk. It's a great honour to be your first ever guest, to set the bar on the Built to Last. And I know, you say we've only known each other a few months, but I know that you, anything you do, you put your mind to, you want to achieve the best. So it's a great honour to be here today, and I'm looking forward to a really engaging conversation, and hopefully we can share some nuggets with our audience that they can take away and take into their own life, and even if that's like a 1% improvement in something, then that's huge, and that spreads across the whole of humanity. So I'm looking forward to seeing where our conversation goes. Yeah,
absolutely. And one thing David did, what was only a few weeks ago now, he spoke at one of our London Built to Last events, and I've brought in many speakers to the Built to Last program, whether it's been through Zoom or events, and my clients were exactly the same as me. They just couldn't believe the story, the inspiration. If you guys can take even a snippet away of, that those guys did, then I know you'll add enormous value. But I just want to reiterate, please listen to this to the end. If you really are someone listening to this, whether you're business owner, entrepreneur, anyone who has ever doubted what you're capable of, because, I say this man's story is something else. So, just to kick off, David, because I don't want to miss anything, because you've achieved so much, and I know you're very humble and you don't like sharing too much about what you've done, but just give people a nutshell of what you've actually achieved, on an athletic basis, in the Paralympic world and Paralympic world, because this man's been a world class athlete for many, many years. But as you'll hear in today's episode, with some traumatic experiences too. So just share some of your experiences, your accolades first and foremost, because I know you're very humble with these, but just I can't keep up with them.
So first of all, I think that what's really important to get across is that before you're an athlete, you're a human. And my philosophy is always human first, athlete second. You develop the athlete. If you develop the human, then you're going to get high performing athletes. And you know, when someone asks you always the question, you know, who are you? It's very easy to go, well, I'm an athlete, and then you identify exactly to the sport you're in and the medals you've won within that sport. And I think if you'd asked me this question, you know, even 10 years ago, I'd have listed off all the things I'd done in sport, and that was my identity that I was attached to. And then, as we'll delve into, I lost that, was taken from me. So when someone asks me that question now to, I guess, what are my palmares within sport? Who am I as an athlete? It's a real challenging conversation, because inside my inner head, I'm then getting pulled back to real deep philosophies around Stoicism and some really, you know, what's written in past tense about values and who you are as a person and a human. You're so much more than your sport. What, you know, your sport is just something you do. So I could say, yeah, I'm David Smith, I'm a cyclist, but I'm not really a cyclist. Cycling's something I do. I've been fortunate, I think. Growing up where I grew up, I was exposed to sport at a very young age. It wasn't really about trying to win medals or titles. It was more of just, I loved moving my body. And I think that has been something that I've carried throughout my whole life. And I think it's probably key and foundational now, in line with my number one value is health. Without our health, we have nothing. So if you don't have your health, you don't have your sport. So my number one value in life is health. And one of the things that relate to that, whether that's physical health, mental health, spiritual health, is moving the body. So for me, sport always started off as a love of moving my body. And then that just sort of naturally fell into different sports at different times. Wherever we are in our life changes, no matter, you know, from point A to point B is never the same. It's a journey that takes many ups and downs and twists and turns. And through all of those turns, there's been different sports for me. I'm a very growth mindset person. So people who are familiar with Carl Dweck's work around growth mindset and fixed mindset, I have a very growth mindset. So when one door closes, I'm always already looking for the next door and the next opportunity. I grew up in a little village in Scotland. So actually the first sport I ever partook in was a sport called shinty. What is shinty? Shinty, for probably no one that's listened to this will probably even have heard of shinty. It's I always like to say it's a little bit of a mad Highland game. It's a bunch of mad Highlanders running around chasing a ball, and the objective is to put the ball in the opposing net. Very rudimentary, very simple. But at a young age, it teaches you principles and values such as teamwork, respect, resilience, persistence. It's a tough sport, so it's a little bit like Irish hurling, stroke ice hockey, stroke field hockey, lacrosse, all kind of merged into one. The ball travels at 80 mile an hour. There's 12 players either team, and there's deep rivalry. You're talking villages that are only 3 miles apart, and there's some real rivalry when those teams meet, and it starts from a very young age. And when you first pick up a shinty stick in these villages, the only goal in your life is to make it to the first team. You know, no, people are not talking about Olympics or anything there. It's about, can you make it to the first team and represent your village? So there's I guess there's a real sort of tribal basis there, but it teaches you a lot of key lessons in life. And this is where sport is so important for youngsters, because it's not about going on winning medals. It's actually, it teaches you some real key values. And I think how I've managed to deal so well with all of the challenges that I've presented in life is actually from these early lessons in sport. So I played shinty for a whole of my youth. At the same time, I did karate, I skied, I water skied, I did everything I could do.
Was this during your teenage years?
This was like before I could even write, you know, like this is like, I started skiing when I was like 4 or 5 year old. I was in my first dojo at 7 year old. I picked up a shinty stick at 5. You know, so I competed all the way through my primary school years into high school in shinty, skiing. I made it onto the British karate team for a short spell.
What age would that have been?
I first fought for Great Britain at 15. But I'd already won Scottish titles as part of Newtonmore Shinty team.
Were you doing athletics at that point?
Not at that point. So athletics would come a little bit later on. So it was all based around shinty, skiing, and martial arts as a youngster. They were like my foundational years. And then there was this, I guess, as I grew up, I was exposed to different sport, different competitions. And then I had seen the Olympics and thought, you know, that would be cool. And
what age would that have been?
That was around about, was it like 18, 19? So
was there anything that first inspired you, when you're thinking, right, okay, I want to be an Olympian? And
no, not really.
Was there anyone?
No, not at all. I think what it was that I just loved sport. I actually wanted to go to the Air Force as a physical training instructor. But that didn't come off. And I was working on a building site actually, and there was an athletics track close by, and the guy I was working with was an athletics coach, and I'd seen, I remember being at a karate competition in South Africa and coming out and seeing a runner on a running track thrown up and thinking, wow, that looks amazing.
And what age would this have been?
I was like 15, so I'd seen it.
So you'd never been on an athletics track until the age of 15?
No, I hadn't been on an athletics track. I only seen it then. I actually hadn't stepped onto an athletics track until the age of 19.
Yeah, so this is going to be staggering when you actually hear what this man's achieved when he wasn't even aware of athletics tracks.
I had no idea about athletics. And I just rocked up and my very first time was handed a pair of spikes and told to run the track, and I ran 50 seconds dead.
Was that in 400 metres?
Yeah, and I'd never ran in my life on a track.
Yeah.
So the athletics coach was like, wow, okay, you have some raw talent. If we train right, we don't know where that time is going to take you.
Yeah.
And I guess, unfortunately at that point, and I guess what we're going to really delve into is that, okay, I had a goal and I had an objective to take that time down and down and down and run faster. As I was trying to lower that time, there was something growing in my body that was basically going to give me a bigger challenge than any training session or any sport would, and ultimately would shape and change my life. I'm determined not to let it define my life, but it has shaped my life, and it shaped me as a person massively, and probably why I'm sat in front of you today. So even though that it doesn't define my life, it still is a big part of where my life has gone. But in the same hand, I did athletics for a short time. I was on the British rowing team for 6 years.
What age would that have been exactly?
I got on the British rowing team when I was about 30. So I had a whole life in sport. I coached with the Olympic ski team in my 20s.
And was that you did bobsleigh?
I did some bobsleigh as well for a little bit. Not hugely successable, but I've pushed on a British team sled at a couple of races.
And with the rowing, who did you?
Rowing, I rowed for Great Britain
alongside
6 years, and we trained. The British rowing team are based in Caversham at the Redgrave and Pins rowing lake. So I was there as in the Paralympic team, but we were merged with the Olympic team. So I rowed alongside some of the arguably the fittest and greatest rowers in the world. So that was a huge eye opener to a real world class system. And then that led into 7 years. I think it was almost 7 years with the British cycling team. Again, a very high performing team, and I was very fortunate, to ride along people like Ed Clancy, who's arguably one of the best team pursuit riders in the world, Mark Cavendish, Chris Hoy. The list is endless of talent that comes out of the velodrome. And the one thing of all the sports that I'm most proud of is the relationships, the people.
Be specific. What do you mean? Exactly.
The people we meet, the people that it's very easy to go through life and just take things for granted and fire an autopilot and not be aware and be attached to your device, or just really in your head. And Eckhart Tolle in The Power Now talks beautifully about the past and the future are merely an illusion. We only have the present moment, and in the present moment is where the magic happens. So always live by the philosophy of be where your feet are. And one of the greatest things I learned in sport was that the friendships and the relationships you build, that you can only really nurture and build relationships if you're in the room with the person. If you're attached to a device or you're not really there and you're kind of talking, you're not really nurturing those relationships. And it's so easy to do in today's world. And what I realized coming through all my sports was that when you're cycling or rowing, you can't have your device. You're with the person, and then you're sharing your recoveries. You're going on this journey together, and you make a lot of friends for life. Sometimes not so. Sometimes there's people I've been friends with in that sport for a short period, and then you move on. You kind of keep in touch, but it's loosely. But there's other people that have become great friends and actually have been a huge help in dealing with the medical stuff that I've gone through. So sport is a huge part of my life, and it's kind of been a long introduction when you ask me a simple question.
No, not at all. I mean, this don't even go to a snippet of what David's talking about. I mean, just tell the listeners here, let's cut to the chase of what happened here. I mean, because your story is pivotal to this, and I think all that stuff you've just shared about being in certain environments, your background, and I've spoke about this previously, even with myself. It just shaped your character to go through tough times, but just share to the listeners like, because obviously I've given a big talk introduction, obviously, and David really plays this down, but just tell the listeners like what you've actually been through. I mean, I've never come across mental strength like it, you know.
So I guess we need to rewind to 1978 and to go back to when David was born. Mm-hmm. He was born with 2 club feet, which is known as talopasis. So the feet are fused backwards in the womb and they come out. So 1 in 1,000 babies are actually born with club foot. And I had those feet reset into special plaster casts and in special boots, and it left my right foot slightly deformed. So I can't actually bend my right knee very well if I'm standing up. So that was like a...
So sorry, Dave, would that have still been the case when you were running 50 seconds at 400 metres?
Yeah.
So you still had one foot.
I've got a deformed foot, which I didn't actually know about. You know, there wasn't... I didn't know about it. It wasn't enough. It wasn't deformed enough that it held me back in life, but it was definitely holding me back in sport. Mm-hmm. I was also misdiagnosed with epilepsy at the age of I think it was under 5-year-old. I'd had 4 or 5 convulsions. I'd stopped breathing in my sleep. I was rushed to hospital. I'd went through a series of tests with imaging to my brain, and very, very stressful for a young kid. And then I was put on Tegretol medication up until the age of 12, which for sure would have had problems with like brain development, neurodevelopment, concentration, focus, etc., which possibly explains why I struggled potentially academically, but my parents found an outlet for me in sport where I managed to get the focus in sport and burn the energy. Now, fast forward until 2010, so from 1978 to 2010, there'd been something wrong. It was like a stone in your shoe that you couldn't quite find, and every time you walk, you feel the stone. There was lots of medical problems. There was lots of pain, illness, fatigue, whole host of things. And then in 2010, I was really struggling. Massive pain in the neck, back. And I was with British Own at the time. And they had put sleep devices on me, and I showed up my fragmentations in my sleep. I wasn't getting any sleep. And also that I was going to the bathroom like maybe something like 30 times a day.
Wow.
So there was like a series of tests that they sent me on. The first was a flexible Sotopsky. So for the guys listening, you want to be crossing your legs right now, because that's when they stick cameras at places you don't want cameras stuck. Mm-hmm. So a few days and few weeks of diagnostics to try and find out what was wrong. There was nothing wrong in the bladder, but there was definitely something wrong with the body. And this is where it's so important, and I believe this is really important, that people connect to their bodies. You know, there's such stigma around like prostate cancer, testicular cancer, all these different, you know, breast cancer. People don't want to check their bodies, and they kind of think, well, it's never going to happen to me. And I'm always under the philosophy, well, why not you? Why not me? And a series of tests. I was a high-performing athlete, so I knew that there was something wrong, but couldn't find out what was wrong. And then one day, I find myself sat in Windsor in a hospital, and a doctor holds up an X-ray film of an MRI scan on a clear screen, and he says, look, that shaded area is a tumour that's inside your spinal cord between C4 to C6, which for people who don't know where that is, it's actually in your neck, and it runs, the nerve route that runs to your lungs passes through that. Actually, to be honest with you, everything that controls your whole body has to pass through C4 to C6. It's a very it's a key area in the body to keep us alive. And I had a tumour there. So,
and what age was this?
I was, I think, about 32.
Okay.
So, from 1978 to 2010, there'd been a whole host of problems. When did this tumour grow? We have no idea, but genuinely brain tumours and spine tumours are very slow growing. So it's certainly been there from the age of 17, 18, when my symptoms first started to appear. But actually, there were symptoms as young as 2 or 3 with the misdiagnosis of epilepsy. So there is a chance that the tumour came from birth. It's related to 2 faulty genes that just basically stick together, and they grow cells that grow, and they're very slow growing. So in 2010, my race in life, or my challenge in life, became very much about staying alive. And I lived by the philosophy that sport gave me the mental toolkit to deal with cancer and everything that was going to come with paralysis, all sorts of stuff. But that really taught me how to live.
Yeah. I mean, fucking hell. Well, I mean, what was your first thought when that happened? I mean, like, you know, when you, because obviously at that point as well, like, you know, give some context. We spoke about this privately. I mean, your body weight, your identity at the time. You were, what was it? 100,
I was 100 kilos, rowing at the British rowing team in an elite system that was all about performance.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, I've left that environment. So I was living these two lives. I was living a life where through the day I was in high performance environments. Mm-hmm. And then in the afternoon, towards the evening, I was sitting in hospitals in London, doctors' surgeries, trying to piece all this together. So really my identity was being hugely pulled, which is damaging to your ego when you're not really fully aware of your ego. Mm-hmm. And at that point, I would quite confidently say that my ego was running me. I wasn't really in sort of management of it. I was very unaware. Self-awareness was very low. Emotional intelligence was very low. I was just turning up to training every day, being told what to do and doing it. But I wouldn't say that I had done the inner work at that point. I was very much training the physical machine. I was training my craft.
Yeah.
But I wasn't really doing the inner work. And when I sat there and heard this word, it was almost like it wasn't real. Like, and Kubler-Ross talks around stages of grief when you have a trauma. Yeah. And one of the first stages is denial. Yeah. So I think I've probably been in denial for the last 12 years. I don't think I've ever really fully accepted what's happened to me, because I have this perception of this athlete. Yeah. And in this thing over here that's just happening concurrently with my athlete lifestyle, it doesn't really fit. So when I sat there, I was like, wow, okay, what does that mean? Because there's no course, you know, when you think back to school and college, there's no one teaches you about life. So there's no lessons about, you know, if you're diagnosed with and told you're going to die, no one has those conversations. And so when you're actually sat in that seat, it's a pretty scary place to be. Yeah. And there's like a million things going on in your mind. And the one thing that I must stress is that this journey is so different for everybody. Yeah. And depending on where you are in your life, there's different ways to deal with it. And for me, my coping strategy was sport at that point. Yeah. So what did David do? He went straight to sport. Mm-hmm. So I basically was like to the doctor, thank you for this news. He said, look, this is above my pay grade. I'm going to have to refer you to a neurosurgeon. And I was like, well, I've got a training camp in 2 days' time. I need to be on that training camp. And I kind of just left there, got in my car and drove back to Bisham Abbey.
So this is with the tumour, you just sort of cracked on?
Well, I just went, I was in denial, so I wasn't thinking. So I just went back to where I went. I went back to my coping strategy, which was in sport. Yeah. You know, I'd never had these conversations before. No one had ever, you know, and this is the thing with life, when everything's going well, it's easy to show up and just be a good person because you're not really being properly challenged. And, you know, pressure is a privilege. So if you're in a high pressure situation that you've chose to be in, that's a privilege. Yeah, yeah. Okay, it's good stress. It's you know, it's stress. It's not, you know, okay, there's tough days where you'll be faced with stuff, but actually if you remind yourself that pressure is a privilege. So being in a high performance sport environment, that's high pressure, but I chose to be there. Yeah. All of a sudden now there's something that's been presented that I didn't choose. Mm-hmm. And it was going to smack you in the face harder than Anthony or Joshua punches. Mm-hmm. It was going to take your legs away from you. Mm-hmm. And ultimately you also don't really have much control.
And how did you deal with that? Because I'm fascinated with this, because I know I massively struggle with things in my life, you know, when I'm not out of control of, you know, when you generally know, especially the level you were at as an athlete, is, you know, when you prepare, you can create a more predictable prediction of the outcome, right? But when you've thrown something that you can't control, how did you first deal with that?
Yeah, so it's super challenging. So obviously I left there, I went to Bisham Abbey, I went straight back into sport, and I can control that. I can be in here, I can do my weights, I do my bike and everything. Yeah. But ultimately there's this thing that I'm going to have to face. Yeah. There's no hiding. If I don't face it, I'm going to die. Yeah, yeah. So right away I went to what I'd learned in sport. Okay, what can you control? The controllables you can't control. Viktor Frankl speaks very poignantly in Man's Search for Meaning about, we have a stimulus and a response, but between stimulus and response there's a space, and within that space is where we have the potential to grow. And I often believe now that we witness the human being running around in a very reactive way, is to use the morning commute as a metaphor. If you get cut up in the morning, someone peeps at you, you react to them in an angry way. You carry that energy, and it becomes your DNA, that anger in those cells. You know, everything about you then becomes ingrained, that you become angry. And, you know, and your thoughts and your feelings become your emotions. They become your behaviors and your actions, and that becomes your habit, and that becomes your habitual, and that's who you become, your personality. And you just become tense. Everything tightens up your chest. You just become a very tense person, and you then get caught up in all the things you can't control, i.e. the weather. You know, it's too hot, it's too cold, it's raining. You're only one click away from a bombardment of negativity, and we're programmed in a way that, you know, for everything that comes in, it's 8 negative to 1 positive. So you're bombarded, and then if you're then saying that out loud, it's like,
you're focusing on that.
70 times more powerful. There's studies, I think it's 70 to 80 times more powerful if you're saying it out loud. And Trevor Mohad, who's unfortunately not alive anymore, he wrote a book called Getting to Neutral Thinking, and he said something beautiful in that book. It was, don't say stupid shit out loud. So I love that, and I would have loved to have met Trevor and you know, sort of been around someone like that when I was first diagnosed.
Okay.
Because I think that could have had a huge, and he went, you know, he was diagnosed with the C word and didn't survive, didn't get to see his 50th birthday. But I think if I'd been in that environment, then I could have probably saved a lot of stuff that I'd gone through trauma-wise. But I just went and hid in sport. But what I did do, and what I didn't realize at the time, from young David playing shinty, karate, skiing, all these sports, he had learned a ton of stuff about setting goals, about controlling the controllables. So how I dealt with it was that I just seen this like it was another race, another fight. If a boxer's going to step into the ring, how does he prepare mentally to step into the ring? So I thought, this is, for me personally, this doesn't work for everyone. This is no different. So I sat down. The first thing I did was like, right, here's my goals over the next however long. Here's how I'm going to do it. Here's the things I can't control. So I can't control what the tumour is going to do. I can't control the surgeons, the nurse, everything like that. But what I can control is that space that Viktor Frankl spoke about. I can't control my thoughts and my feelings, but I have an influence over saying stuff out loud. So I became very mindful about, right, what am I saying out loud to my friends, my family, around this diagnosis. I didn't really want to talk about it. I was more focused on getting the next step. Like, what's the next step I can do? So rather than going into a state of anxiety and threat and panic, in many ways I perceived it as a challenge. And again, it comes back to this perception. I can't change the diagnosis. That's what's happened. I have to accept it. And then from acceptance, then I can then rationally almost move into a place of cognitive control where I'm making rational decisions, not emotional decisions. And you can see this, and you'll relate to this from your boxing days, in any sporting environment. When somebody starts to perform purely on emotions, they're going to lose. You know, you need to have a higher cognitive level to be able to manage your body states, to be in the right state. And Andrew Huberman talks about it. You know, he's the lead neuroscientist at Stanford, and he talks beautifully about being in an alert and calm state. That's where ultimate performance is. So no matter what you're dealing with, whether you're in the special forces or you're an entrepreneur or you're a surgeon or an athlete, if you can get into an alert and calm state, you can. So
what were your things to keep you in that calm and alert state? Because I know there's so many different things, but especially when you've been just thrown a curveball like that and a trauma, what is your thing? Like, what do you do to get in that state?
I breathe, and that might sound really, really crazy, but as a youngster, when I was in karate, we were taught how to breathe to regulate the states. So the first thing I started to do was obviously go back to sport. I was training. I had an appointment with a neurosurgeon 3 days after that first diagnosis in Windsor, and up until that point I was meditating without knowing I was meditating, because I'd been meditating from the age of 7 in karate. So at the start of every karate session, we did a meditation. At the end of every session, we did a meditation.
Wow.
So I didn't know I was meditating, but I was.
Yeah.
And I'd learned all these skills that I had no idea I'd learned them.
Yeah.
And now, okay, I wasn't on the start line of World Championships or Olympic final or Paralympic final. I was sat facing life or death. And these skills came in perfectly, and it was probably the best toolbox that anyone could have taken to this.
Would you say that had you not done that work for all those years, that you would have pulled through that first bout of?
That's a hard one. I think probably not. I probably wouldn't have come through it the way I did, and the way I approached it if I hadn't had those lessons in sport at a young age. I think I would have gone into it in a much more unstructured way. Mm-hmm. So when I sat down with the neurosurgeon and he told me, look, we're going to cut through the front of your neck. We're going to go into the vertebrae. We're going to cut open your spinal cord. We're going to remove a tumour. We're going to put you back together with screws, cages and plates. And you should be back in a boat in 3 months' time. Okay. When those words left his mouth, I heard them, but I don't think they really sunk into the cells of my body, because I didn't want them to sink in. I didn't want to identify to this. I was still very much over in the performance environment. Yeah. So I left that meeting, went home, and was like, "What does this even mean? Like, I don't understand what this means." That I'd only seen the neurosurgeon. I hadn't been handed by oncology or anything else. So I didn't really get the gravitas of what this was. I had no training medically. I had no neuroscience education, no psychology, nothing. I literally was just an athlete. So I didn't know what questions to ask. I didn't know anything. So I just basically went to athlete mode. So I did my breathing. I kept exercising. Now, it was like a roller coaster. There was, within him telling me what they were going to do and me going to surgery, was 7 days. Yeah. In that 7 days, I was all over the place. Like, I was crying, then I was on a high, then I was phoning friends and telling them, hey, I've got this. It was crazy. Yeah. I think I was probably doing my best to manage it. And the long-term goal was to get out of there, get back in a boat and make it to the World Championships. Yeah. Day of surgery, you walk in, you're put into your hospital gown, you put the socks on, and I'm lying in my bed, and the surgeon comes in and says, all right, we've had all our meetings, we're definitely going through the front of the neck. Yeah. It became real.
In that moment?
In that moment. Up until that moment.
And at that point, physically, you're 100 kg, give or take. Yeah. Muscly, you box, you've sprinted 50 second 400 meters. Like you say, you're a bit powerful guy.
Strong athlete, living my life, not aware of, just living my life, just doing what every other human is doing, getting up in the morning, going out and smashing life and just trying to be a good human being. And then all of a sudden now I'm in this other world, and this world runs parallel from the start of mankind to the end, when, wherever the human race goes. Yeah. There's people going to work, and then there's people sitting fighting for their life in hospital beds all around us. Yeah. Like that, when I've been in hospital and I've watched people in their suits commuting back and forward, I'm like, wow, do they even know that they're actually passing a hospital right now? Have they actually just paused and been a little bit compassionate and mindful to be like, well, okay, I'm actually lucky to be out here today. Yeah. I know I didn't. I'd never seen this world. But now when he sat there and stood in the room and I'm lying in this bed, this is where this became real. Yes. And I was like, wow, like this is about to happen. Yeah. So I was like, whoa, okay. So a little bit of a cluster, signed some documents, walked to the anesthetic room. And I just said to myself, imagine if this was walking onto the dojo mat or into the boxing ring, like head high, posture, breathing, regulate the state, stay alert and calm. I didn't know the science behind it at this point. I just knew that if I was going to go on to fight in a dojo, I'll do the same thing.
So you were trying to revert back to what is David Smith at peak state?
Yeah.
And how can I replicate that to the best of my ability in this given moment?
Because I'm going into a stressful situation that has consequences that could mean death, could mean full paralysis from the neck down, and they're also all out of my control. Because none of this is in my control. As soon as I lie on the bed, I give up my physical body to the surgeon and the medical team. So I actually have, at that point, not really any influence over what they do.
Yeah.
So I'm not even awake to say, hey, actually, you know what, I disagree with this. I think we should change. That's all taken out of my hand. So I'm like, I need to go into this. Like, what's my next step? Again, be where my feet are.
Yeah.
At this point, the whole body is jacked on, like there's dumps of cortisol. There's whole, like your whole body is like all over the place. Because unlike sport where the consequences you might lose, the consequence here is that you might never wake up again. Yeah. And you don't even know that. So you walk into the anesthetic room, you climb up onto the anesthetic bed, there's like a chill in the room. It's cold. There's so much going on around you. People are in their zones. Everyone's doing their thing. And there's just this moment again, this space between stimulus and response. And at this point, the space is really powerful. Because you're sat there and you're thinking, what if this is the last thing I ever see? Are these going to be the last people I ever see? God, you know what? I was in a hurry this morning, left, didn't say I love you.
You start questioning everything at that point.
Start questioning everything. You start questioning who you are, the life you live, the values you live by, is chasing Babylon worth it? You know, all these questions are like going through your head. Your head is racing at 1,000,000 miles an hour. The quickest way to get out of your head is to go to your breathing. So I just took myself to my breathing. 4 seconds in, 8 seconds out, stimulating the parasympathetic system, starting to slow the body down. And then the tubes are going in, and the surgeons, the anesthetist is talking to you, and you're talking back. And one of my strengths is humor. And in a stressful situation, humor starts to come out. So you're trying to joke and make lightheartedness of what's going on. And then before you know it, you're lying back looking at the roof, and you're counting back from 10. And the only thing I remember saying to myself, this is not going to hurt. Because the only thing I'm going to feel is the little pinprick into my hand, and then I'm asleep. And what would happen over the next 5 or 6 hours was a huge shock to the body. And I woke up in ICU with tubes coming out of my neck and a whole host of things. And it was a really, wow, like it was such a surreal experience to wake up there in ICU, spend the next 24 hours in ICU. Like you feel good because you're obviously on morphine. And
I get it. I've had that. I'm pressing the button relentlessly.
Relentlessly pressing the button, and then you're in your little bedroom, and you're there, and then after that 6 days, you're being told, right, it's time to go home.
So where were you at 6 to 8 days later, and what happened then?
6 to 8 days. You know, I'd sort of recovered. My body was moving. I was gently, tentatively just moving around. And they sent me home. And I had a spinal stroke when I got home, and I was rushed back into hospital with probably hours left to live. And the only thing I can really remember is arriving at the hospital doors, falling into the wheelchair, pooing over somebody, as you do, and then being in a hospital bed, hooked up to drips and in MRI scanners to be told that, you know, this blood clot had formed at the surgery site. Now, if that had gone up towards the brainstem, I would have been dead, which I didn't realise at the time. It's probably taken 12 years for that to really sink in. And then I was told I was going to have to go through an emergency surgery come Monday morning.
That was a week later?
Yeah, a week later.
Yeah.
So a week later, they had to cut open again, remove all the metal work, go back in and decompress the spinal cord. I woke up from that, and I couldn't really move from the neck down. I was like really weak, and it was like a temporary paralysis. And I spent a month in bed, and the only goal through there was just to try and touch my nose with my hand, try to sit up, try to stand. And
And you at this point, have you still got that goal of being in the rower 3
Yeah,
months
I'm
later?
still like...
So this is after the first tumour.
Yeah.
Obviously, David's going to share.
Yeah, I'm still thinking I'm going to be at the World Championships, which are at the end of the year.
Okay.
And I'm thinking, well, you know, I can still make that. And I held on to that belief. Mm-hmm. My body wasted away from 100 kilos to 65 kilos.
Like, I want listeners to comprehend that, okay? Like, you're 32, you've been 100 kg, like, and probably felt strong, fit, powerful, probably been that guy that wins most things. Me and you spoke privately about that in terms of, you know, when you get used to being a winner and competitive, and like one thing me and David spoke about for this podcast was obviously when you've been in a sport environment, been around winners and elite athletes, you know, it rubs off, it just becomes the norm. So, and then from an identity perspective, visually, when you get used to seeing yourself in that certain way, and I'll speak about this in previous podcasts, David, where it's like one of the strongest forces in the human race is the need to remain consistent with how you viewed yourself, described yourself up to that point, which is why so many people struggle with change, especially if you listen to this, you're overweight, and it's because you get used to being who you are. So you're 100 kg, you've just been through 2 ops back to back, and you dropped what's that, 35 fucking kg in how long?
We're now probably 3 weeks into
that
the
is
process.
Fucking madness.
So, and again at that point, as you'll know as well, when you train, is that you're focused on the goal. I was like, okay, I need to get back in a boat and get to the World Championship. At
65 kg, you're still saying,
and
fuck.
You know, a lot of the stuff at this point was subconscious. I didn't really know what I was doing, but I was like, okay, what would the athlete do? Okay, what was I doing as an athlete? Okay, get up at 7 o'clock in the morning, be at training, blah, blah, all these things. So I just did the same thing. I'd wake up, okay, first go, have breakfast. Second go, try and touch my nose with my hand. Third go, try and tense my quads. After that, I needed to sleep for an hour. But it was a small win. I celebrated the small wins.
Yeah.
I kept the I guess the vision and the dream of what my North Star was, but I detached from that and came right back to the moment, be in the present moment, and all I could do was.
How was the body at that point in terms of the paralysis?
Yeah, so the paralysis wasn't
prominent at that point.
It wasn't prominent. It was just there was like it's like almost that the body had just been knocked offline.
Yeah.
So I couldn't really move, but it was more of just I needed to get things firing again.
Yeah.
So it was like there was a temporary paralysis, but it wasn't what I'd later experience, which I would learn.
Yeah.
But I had to learn to walk again.
That was the first time.
The first time I had to learn to walk.
Yeah, and please, guys, listen to this full episode to comprehend. This is the first time.
This is the first time. So I guess it's second time because we learn as a baby, but most of us do this subconsciously. So all of a sudden, I'm presented with this overwhelming thing that I'm going to have to learn to walk.
Yeah,
I was like, well, holy shit! Like, how does that even work?
Yeah.
But you put one foot in front of the other, and you just keep going. What's the next step? What do I need to do to be able to take the next step?
Yeah.
Okay, so I need to sleep. I need to eat good foods. I need to do the imagery work. So I'd visualize me standing and walking and running. I would visualize the rowing sessions. I would spend. What was I going to do? I was in a bed for almost 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. So I had time to visualize and do the imagery work. So I guess in many ways, visualization is great. Imagery is like almost taking it to another level. So you could, I could smell the water. I could hear the birds. Bearing in mind, I was in a room with no daylight.
Yeah.
No connections to nature. My vitamin D levels were completely rock bottom. My lips, I'd had ulcers all over my lips. I couldn't really eat because the pain in my mouth was so sore. My skin had all dried up. So there was a whole like secondary things that started to happen due to not being outside.
Yeah.
So this is why it's so important to get outside and get this natural light. Yeah. And so there was all these things happening, and at the same time I'm trying to recover but also trying to move forward. So learning to walk was an horrendous experience, but I celebrated the small wins. So every day I set a goal, you get the dopamine release from the anticipation of the goal.
How do you do that? Because I talk about this with clients all the time, mate. And ironically, I was on a call with one of my clients yesterday, and he's been in the program 4 weeks. He's dropped 3 or 4 kg, and he's focusing on what he's not doing. He's made massive progress. He's still having factor in his social balance, and I'm like, tell me the last time in the last 5 years, you've dropped 3 or 4 kg, and you know the first 4 weeks with social balance, right? You know, and I said to him exactly the same, celebrating the small wins, because you know you're someone who's, as you come on to shortly, you've won gold medals, and like elaborate a bit more on like why it's important to celebrate the small wins, like especially when you were obviously where you were, but why is it important for anyone to celebrate small wins? Because we talk about it all the time. Generally, it's the pursuit, not the outcome that people weren't. Because we're so quick as humans to beat ourselves up and focus on what you couldn't do, and especially when you're in that situation. Yeah. I mean, I can only imagine you would have had a catalogue of reasons to beat yourself up and focus on what you can't do or couldn't do at that point. So I think
we delve a little bit into psychology. We're programmed almost to notice the negative. It's a survival thing within the mind. You know. And also we have a negative bias, so things come in, we notice more of the negatives. It does keep us safe. If we walk down a street, we're always looking for things that might endanger us. Yeah. So it's very easy then to be pulled into this environment where we're always focusing on the things that are going wrong. It's like if you stand up and give a public speech, there might be 99 people in the room who are engaged and loving it. You'll focus on the one person who doesn't like it. You read all your comments on social media, there might be 90%, 99% all great. There'll be one that's not good, and you'll focus on that one, and that'll be the one. And it's again down to a framework where they say, you know, don't think of the pink elephant for the next minute that we're talking, and people are going to think they're going to. And the more you try to suppress an emotion, the more it actually comes through. So if I'm telling myself, you know, don't think of this, don't think of the process, I need to stop thinking and focusing on this, I'm actually going to focus on it more. So it's almost like we need to switch our attention over. And that's why it was so important. Okay, so I'm going to write the goals that I want to achieve daily. So that's one catalyst to getting into a flow state. So Mihai Csikszentmihalyi, who studied flourishing and flow, is the godfather of flow. One of the characteristics of getting into a flow state is clear goals. And the challenge skill balance. So the challenge is slightly out of your skill level, so it drives focus, because focus precedes flow. So it gets you into a focused state. But those clear goals are very clear. They're very important. So every day I woke up, I would have a list of clear goals that I wanted to achieve. Not for the day, but for each hour. Like I micro broke this down to the hour. So I didn't tell myself not to focus on the things I couldn't do. I just started focusing on what I could do. And you can only focus on one thing at a time. So this idea that people multitask is rubbish. You totally agree. Task switch, but you can't fully be immersed in something and be doing something else. So by focusing on these goals that I had to do hourly, it drove me over here rather than focusing on the things I couldn't do. I didn't tell myself, well, you know, don't think about this, don't think about that, because then that's why I would then gravitate to that mindset. And that's why the news is so dangerous, because it's bombarding us with this negativity all the time. So I made these lists for every hour. And again, okay, so as I'm writing them down, and this is the important thing, writing them down. So I'd write them down. What would
you say writing down? Because obviously in that point, because you know how we spoke about, I'm big on journaling and stuff like that, is you're present when you're doing it, and then you're emotionally connecting.
And you're accountable. You're making yourself accountable. You're putting it down there. So it's like signing a contract with yourself. And just by writing it down is so important. And this is why journaling is such a key thing in developing yourself as a human being. So by writing them down, I'm seeing them. So there's an anticipation. So there's a dopamine release. Then when you achieve them, and these are only small goals. These were only little minute things I knew that I could probably achieve, because I wanted early success and I wanted to celebrate it. So I wasn't saying, okay, I'm going to go and run 400 meters today, because I knew that is unrealistic. That's not going to happen. But I made a shopping list. So you think about if you go to Tesco and you don't have a list, you just go wild. And you get to the checkout and you always say, I only came in for one thing. And you're leaving with a basket of things.
Or you forget certain things because you're not clear.
So goals are as simple as just making a shopping list. So if you have a shopping list for each hour, and these are the things I need to tick off, then you do them. And it's also coming with a level of compassion. If there's certain things I don't tick off that day, that's okay, because I also need to rest and recover. And that was my framework. And I worked from the minute I woke up all the way to getting back into a boat 6 months later, to then being a world champion 14 months later.
So where you were back in the boat after, so you went down to 65 kg,
yeah,
right? And this is only a snippet still of what David's achieved, so I can't keep up with this. So you went from 65 kg to 6 months later, obviously being back in a boat, okay, after teaching yourself how to walk. And then how long after did you win the world
14
title?
months later, I was a world champion. So there's a lot in there. And we'd be here all day going through every single intimate detail of that. But I think there was a few things I said in that. I said I could never go through this again. That was one thing that was an inner narrative in my voice. Was like, wow, there's no way I could go through this again. The pain, the suffering.
Yeah.
But I was very, very clear on my philosophy.
Yeah.
So my philosophy at that point was to be a world champion.
Yeah.
So that was my why. So
why?
That was my why.
I'm asking you why was it? What was the inner reason of like?
The inner reason was, I think because I'd set out on this journey with British Rowing to be a world champion. That was the values that I'd set out with. There was no negotiation. It was just like, I want to be a world champion and go on to London to win gold. That was the goals I'd set.
Yeah. And
Friedrich Nietzsche talks very poetically about if you know your why, you can withstand any how.
Yeah, totally agree.
And that was something that obviously Viktor Frankl took into his book with Man's Search for Meaning as well.
Yeah.
So I was very clear on my philosophy. So anytime I started to struggle and I couldn't do it, I went back to my why.
Yeah.
I always went back to my why.
Yeah.
And I had it written down. And I was like, right, be world champion, win a gold medal in London.
Yeah.
So I would look at that. And the days where I felt like I couldn't get up and couldn't get moving, I'd be like, what's your why, David?
So was that the thing that when you didn't want to do the things you should do?
Yeah.
Would you say, because I mean, I must bore people to death on this podcast and clients and on social media, like motivation. Guys, you're listening to someone who's won Olympic and World Championship gold medals, right? Motivation does not last. You don't wake up every day, and especially when like you had the adversity that David's been with. But was it always your why, that like conscious and subconscious driving force? That,
and like you say, there's days you wake up and you're like, today's hard, but then you go to your why, and that was always my driving thing. And I remember, first time getting back on a rowing machine and having to row 18 kilometers on a rowing machine when you just had your spinal cord cut open, your spine cut open twice. You had 2 general anesthetics. You went all this weight, all the pain, all the medication, everything. And then a few months later, you're trying to row 18 kilometers on a rowing machine.
Yeah.
When you still can't feel your body from your neck down. It's still numb and you still can't really walk properly.
Yeah.
What gets you through that? It's the same as somebody who's working maybe 80-hour weeks and they're like, I don't have time to go to the gym. I was like, well, you need to make time because if you don't invest in your body and then you're faced with this environment, you ain't got the toolkit, you ain't got the physiologies working for you, the inner work's not there for you. So you can't give. Michael Gervais talks about 3 things you can train in life. You can train your craft, you can train your physiology and your mind. Now, if you give 100% purely to just your craft, which is your job, and you're not investing in your body and your mind, the body keeps a score. You might get away from it through your 20s, but there's a score being kept. Yeah. And by the time you get to your 40s, you're going to have potentially neuro degeneration in the neurons in the brain. You've not been sleeping properly, so you're going to have a build-up of plaques and a protein called beta amyloid that doesn't clear your brain. You're then lining yourself up for a stroke. Yeah. So you need to train all of those 3 and you need to invest in them. So for being an athlete, that's kind of easy because
it's what you do. It's who you are. Yeah,
it's who you are.
I get it.
And what I'm trying to say to people is what I learned through that first surgery, going from being diagnosed to getting back into a boat to being a world champion, was how important to train these 3 things were. Yeah. And I'm not saying to people that you have to go and become an athlete. Yeah. But you should still be thinking about, okay, if I'm investing in my craft, how much investment am I putting into my body? How much investment am I putting into my mind? Because I need all of these things to kind of be working for me.
Yeah, because I suppose, like, because of your athletic background, and even when on a tiny scale, and like my bicep ruptures pennies, it's nothing compared to you now, but because of the mental resilience you build up through, like you say, working the body, and getting yourself out of your comfort zone mentally and physically, when you are thrown a genuine life trauma, okay, that isn't just business, but I even challenge that even if you had an emotional trauma or a financial trauma in business, you're more likely to handle it with better focus if you've actually got some grit physically and mentally anyway. Yeah. But obviously when you come from an athletic background, that's ingrained in you. But what would you say to people who are currently, like you say, neglecting these things through chasing business? Because maybe if you are listening to this and you are not physically where you want to be, or you are parking all of your energy into making money, providing for family, I totally get it. But like, what would you hammer home to people who are just skipping that gym session or two, or, you know what I mean? Or, oh, it's okay, it doesn't matter about me, I'm going to serve the agenda of the people, it's all about numbers, because at some point, I truly believe it will bite you in the arse. And a lot of people wait till there's a trauma for something to happen, but you can't just pick up a switch and go, like, okay, I've got no training, but fuck it, I'm going to handle it.
Yeah.
You know?
I think it's a super hard one, because I think studies probably show that if you are not faced with a trauma, you're unlikely to change. If you're in that Groundhog Day, if everything's going to happen, and people are giving you information, like, yeah, well, it's fine. I'll take a little bit of this, and everything's great. I'm making money. I've got my car, and and then you probably don't really question stuff until you're really faced. Yeah. And then some people still don't even question it then. But to become awakened to that level there has to be a catalyst sometimes, and I think that unfortunately that's maybe the world that we live in. It's maybe a default in the human system, but I think it does. Like, if you look at a lot of people, whether it's Rich Roll, John McAvoy, me, myself, yourself as well, from different, from your transition from football to where you are now. Yeah. There's always something that drives that catalyst. There's always like some form of trauma, and that's all relative to people. Maybe trauma is too powerful a word, but it's relative to the obstacles that people face on their level. And I always say to people, look, there ain't no one getting out of this scot-free. No. Now, social media presents a world that sometimes everything looks rosy and everything looks great. But that's not true. It's false. There's nobody getting out of this without a scratch. Even the most success, if we look at success in the terms of medals, if it's in sport or business, if it's money or whatever it is, I don't know anyone that's got to the top of where they've got without some form of like picking up scars and scratches. And some people's scratches are bigger than others, but no one gets out of it scot-free.
Absolutely, because I've taught many of my clients are going to listen to this, of course, hopefully all of them. But like, think of the challenges that every single one of our clients would have had, especially the elite level business people. It's like, I don't know anyone who's had this super smooth curveball. And as I say to people, like, if you've demonstrated that you've pushed through adversity, resilience, multiple stages in that quest to build that business, you've got it in you.
Yeah, you have. And I think as well is that it's easy to say, okay, you should maybe be reading Stoicism or writing your values down or journaling. But I think what is also important to know that everyone's different. And I think it's knowing what works for you. But I can't get away from the fact that I think everyone could benefit from a level of self-awareness that's aware of their thoughts and feelings and their emotions and what they are. So Susan David, who's a psychologist in America, she wrote a book called Emotional Agility, and she talks beautifully around the emotions are data points to show where we are, what's happening in our environment. But they are coming from only a set of beliefs, and our beliefs are not often fact, they're just beliefs. And when we can sit with a belief and monitor it, and again work on that space between stimulus and response, we can sit with it and be like, okay, well, give me evidence for this. Is this just my belief and my perception of something? Actually, it's not a truth, it's only a belief. It's causing this feeling, which is giving me this emotion, which is then making me act in a certain way. And is this actually serving me? Is it serving my family, my situation, etc.? possibly yes, possibly not. How do I change this? So when we're talking about sustained change and motivation and going to my why and knowing my philosophy, I think most people would benefit from knowing their philosophy. I don't think everyone's got values, everyone's got a philosophy of what they stand for. It's the actions that you show each day are coming from your values. They're coming from what means the most to you. But I don't think many people can articulate that. And I think that causes a lot of damage in everything in life, relationships, business, professional, personal relationships, when values don't align with your goals and with your partner's goals, all sorts of stuff. It can cause a whole host of issues. And I think what I learned during that process of those first 2 surgeries was that knowing your values and what you stand for is very, very important. And that then has to align with your goals. And if they don't align with your goals, then you're going to struggle, and you're going to struggle to find the motivation. So at that point, my values were very much about being a world champion, about going to London. That was what really meant important to me. So that aligned with my goals. So my goal was to go to London, be a world champion, but my values were also about being a winner. And that, so that all kind of aligned. So there was no real issue there. And at that level, I had to be selfish to come back. So yeah, okay, family was a lower value at that point, because if I'd given that my number one priority, then
you wouldn't have had the focus and the attention. You wouldn't be around for the family, let's be honest.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
So that would have suffered. I was very fortunate to be a single guy with no family and kids, and so I didn't really that didn't feature then. But when you're trying to juggle all of it, that's when it becomes super challenging.
I even say that, David, you know, even if you had a family at that point, right, if you didn't put yourself first, I know this is like, you know, diversing maybe perhaps. If you didn't put yourself first, then would you have had the strength, like, to then be around for and that family, you know?
Yeah.
And
so this is beautifully led back to your question. Is, you know, in airports they always tell you to put your oxygen mask on first, because you can't, if you don't put your oxygen mask on first, you can't care for other people.
No.
So when somebody is thinking, I just don't have the motivation right now, we need to go and look at your philosophy for life. So if you have a family, and your philosophy is, I want to see my daughter or my son go to university, get married, and have a life. If you're not looking after your body and your mind, you might not be there to see that. So to me, that's a pretty powerful why. So when someone's saying, you know what, I'm just going to reach for the bottle of wine, or I'm going to miss my gym session, or I don't have time to do, I don't have time to do breathing work. I don't have time to go for my morning walk. I'm like, well, you need to find time, because if you know your philosophy and it's very clear that you want to achieve this, have this sort of like, be this type of human, but you also want to stay around to see your kids grow. Yeah,
be a good role model and stuff. That slightly contradicts that. Boy, you go, I would do anything for I'd do anything for my family. But do you?
But do you? Do you actually really do you? You know, are you willing to not consume crappy foods that are full of chemicals, neglect your health, neglect all this, not go to the gym? You know, so if you're neglecting your physiology and your mind, you're not really giving yourself the best chance to then see your children grow up. And that's a powerful why. So if you're about to reach into the fridge and grab all the wrong things, which are then going to make you feel sluggish, which are then going to demotivate you for the next day's training, just check in with your why. You know, I believe everyone should have their philosophy written down. Literally, I think everyone would benefit from this work. Writing what your philosophy is, what your values are, what you stand for in life. Be very, very clear on that. Because when you're challenged with a decision or a choice, you make it from one that's based on values, not one that's based on maybe an instant pleasure or an instant dopamine hit. You actually sit. So, you know, people say, I don't have time to go to the gym, I don't have time to breathe work, but you have time to scroll on your phone for four.
You don't even get me going on this.
You know, but what I'm saying is, you know, that you always come back to your why. So British Rowing used to have a philosophy: does it make the boat go faster? If the answer is yes, you did it. If the answer was no, you didn't. Very, very simple. We don't have to get complex about this stuff. And it's the same thing. You can ask your question, well, if I don't go to the gym or I don't do these things, am I investing in my longevity and my health in this planet? because what I've realized from surgery 1 and 2, without going to surgery 6, is that this is not really a test run, depending on your religious beliefs. But this is like,
we're in the game now.
We're in the game. Like, we don't get, like, yesterday doesn't come back, and tomorrow doesn't even exist yet. The only thing that exists is very much the present moment in time. So if you want to get the most out of the present moment in time, you want to be hydrated, you want to be fueled, you want to
just
be
basic shit,
basic, like, simple stuff. It gets overcomplicated, but it's not rocket science.
It's just fucking do it.
Do the simple things well. Do the simple things well, and just literally, as Nike would say, just do it.
Yeah. Totally agree. And then, so you've had your 2 surgeries. Then I say chop through, it sounds really bad because there's so many things that this man's had to deal with. But, if you thought that was the end of David Smith's surgeries, then you listen to we're wrong. Just elaborate on what happened then. So you beat tumour 1.
Tumour 1 was done. I got to the start line of London. I crossed the London line and came away with a gold medal, did all that stuff. Found myself back in Scotland. Again, one of my values is connecting with nature, moving my body, being in flow states. This is stuff that means very much, this is like my non-negotiables. I need to do this in my life for me to have a flourishing life. And I'm very clear on that. So I went back to the Highlands. I spent the winter skiing. And then as the summer came around, I jumped on a bike. I started cycling. And I was thinking, wow, I'm still attached to, certain values about winning in sport, and pursuing medals and that high performance environment. It's like, what, it would be so cool to go to Rio on a bike. And
so the Rio Olympics, right?
Yeah. So I was thinking, let's look at Rio in a different sport.
So had you cycled much at that point?
No, I hadn't really ever been on a bike. I hadn't really ever been
so
on a bike.
So you just decided, like, okay, you obviously been through a couple of surgeries and, win the gold medal in, rowing. So now let's... Let's go to the bike.
Because it also been done. So, have you heard of Albert Bandura?
I haven't.
Okay, so Albert Bandura, for those that have not heard of him, he coined something called self-efficacy, which is that self-belief that you have the skill set to do something.
Yeah.
And one of the pillars of that is vicarious experiences. So seeing other people do it. Mm-hmm. So representation in a certain sphere. So I'd seen people already do that. I'd seen people go from being rowers to cyclists.
So you knew it was capable.
So I knew it was possible.
Yes.
I knew it was possible. So, and this is something, again, that's come through all of the stuff that I deal with now with paralysis. I've seen in the Paralympics, I've had doctors tell me, you can't do this, you can't do that. Again, focusing on areas, but I'm like, hey, I'm in Paralympic sport. I see the impossible done every single day. Mm-hmm. So when people say to me, David, I can't swim, I'm like, I've seen a guy swim with no arms and no legs. And you're telling me, as a fully able-bodied person, you can't swim? Mm-hmm. You need to put the word yet behind that. So I can't swim yet.
What do you think it's language, or it comes down to beliefs again, why people say these things?
Language, again, the language we use is so powerful. So if someone's saying, you can't do this, you can't do that, and then you're thinking, okay, I can't do this, your self-efficacy drops. So then you believe that you can't do something, and then your self-esteem drops, everything drops, and you're less likely to put yourself out there, because then you start to fear stepping out of your comfort zone, because you fear how people might judge you or how you might look. So people then just it's easier just to sort of shy away. It goes back to that survival thing. We just want to be in our safe environment, but nothing great happens if you're not willing to take the jump, that first step. Do that. Like when I was paralyzed that first time, just to take that first step. So my first goal was to get from my bed just to my door, which is only 2 meters away. I was so terrified. And I had all these things. What if I fall? What if this? Building all these what if bridges. But ultimately, I had to take that first step. So that takes courage. And courage doesn't mean not being scared. It just means, okay, how am I going to manage the fear and rationalize it, and then being able to take that first step, which is huge. But when you take that first step, you then get your confidence. It builds that self-efficacy again. So you're then more likely to be able to go again and take the next step and the next step.
I love it, Davey, because I totally agree with that. Because I think I've done a previous podcast on this, on certain emotions. If we didn't have these emotions in abbreviated terms, negative emotions creep into us, or the fearful emotions, you wouldn't experience the flip side of the heightened emotions, but it's changing the way you look at that emotion and feeling.
Yeah.
You know, because I don't know if I've got this right. Is it something like anxiety and excitement? It's a similar state that our body goes into.
Yeah.
So
it's exactly.
But it's changing
state.
the way you look at it, rather than don't acknowledge it, but don't let it control you in a negative way. If it's serving no purpose on the outcome that you desire,
and it's the perception of it. You know,
because
some people perceive it as a fear, others perceive it as a challenge. If you can perceive it as a challenge, and your body releases more like testosterone with hormone, where if it's a threat, it's more cortisol. You tighten up, you become upper chest breathing, your shoulders get tight, and no one performs well at that point. So, and there's a lot of work you can do around that stuff. Andrew Human talks a lot of stuff that you can do in the moment that really helps you control those states. And again, all back to breathing. It's simple stuff, connecting to the body, connecting to that autonomic nervous system, the brain, the visual system, what we see, what we hear. I think we really underestimate the power of our environment, the power of the people around us, the power of the language, the power of the stuff we read, you know, stuff that we're seeing that we're not even aware that we're seeing. Marketeers are very, very clever. They'll produce stuff that you don't even know you've seen, and it can influence your choices. Yeah,
it all affects your state and your beliefs, because I talk about the power of three, and I'm not trying to say I made this up. I first learned about this up more specifically. Some of the Tony Robbins learning I've done is he talks about your state is controlled by your focus, your language, your beliefs, your physiology, you know, and what you've just articulated there is exactly that, really, isn't it? Language, what you focus on, the words you put out, what you do with your body, that controls your state, which influences your decision. Do you know what I mean? And
so I had a really powerful lesson with this. So when I transferred to cycling, I had an inner voice that would say, what if the tumour comes back? And this started off very, very small, but then it started to dial up, and it got louder and louder. It was like turning this radio on, and I was like, I don't want to be on this channel. But the more I told myself I didn't want to be on this channel, the more I struggled to get off this channel. Because remember, the more you tell yourself not to think of the pink elephant, the more you think of the pink elephant.
So you're focusing on that.
So I was focusing on that. So the only way I could escape that was getting into flow states, setting those goals, taking my concentration and focus from here and shifting it over to somewhere else. So I was like, I'll just pursue the cycling dream. But I knew the voice would come in. But again, I can't stop that coming in. But I can choose what I do with it when it does come in. I don't have to verbalize that to the world. I don't have to speak it out loud and say, as Trevor Moy would say, don't say stupid shit out loud. So I would sit with it and I'd be like, okay, well, this is a natural thought to have because I've been diagnosed once before. But I recognize that it is just a thought. It's caused a feeling of disease, anxiety, and then some emotions of sadness and fear have come into my body. But that's actually given me a little bit of information of where I am at the moment. How do I deal with that? Okay, I'm going to get on my bike. I'm going to go and cycle. I'm going to set some goals. And it's not denying it's there. It's just acknowledging it, accepting it with a level of compassion, but being like, okay, well, that's, again, uncontrollable. I can't really control if this grows back or not. But what I can do is I can train my body and my mind to be as robust as possible. If it does come back, I'm in the best shape physically and mentally to deal with it.
So I think with something like that as well, David, when you have that mindset, you know, you're going, right, I'm doing everything I can with my mind, my body. Even if things, you don't get the outcome you desire, you've got no regrets. You're not thinking, what if, and I wish I did this, I wish I did that. And I think one of the biggest pains of anything is looking back, I wish I did that.
And I think that, you know, I remember Chris Hoy actually says this once. He said, you know, if you're at a race and you lose the race, but you can look in the mirror and say, you know what, I did every single thing possible. I'm okay. That guy was a better athlete. But if you look in, and you can only really lie to yourself. If you look in the mirror and go, well, you know what, I missed this session. I did this. I did that. Then you can't expect to win.
Because I think your self-worth disintegrates when on the front end you might say, oh, I did my best. I'm trying to train well, eat well, move well, or just learn well, whatever it is. But when no one else is around and it's just your conversation with yourself to yourself and you're looking yourself in the mirror, I think because we've all done it, there's no judgment, listen to this, I've done it at different stages in my life for different things, But when you do that repeatedly, or you've done it with a certain thing, I think there's nothing drains confidence quicker within yourself.
Yeah.
Irrelevant of the perception of how confident
Yeah.
you want people to think you are, or how people think you are.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
And you hear a lot of stuff about fake it till you make it. That doesn't work.
Absolute
it doesn't work.
bullshit.
That's such an influencer term. Just fake it till you make it, because you can't lie to yourself. You know you're faking it.
Yeah.
So then that goes back to what Bandura's work was on self-efficacy. If you're trying to fake it till you make it, your self-efficacy is going to be low. So then actually you're not going to be able to perform. So for me, I was like, well, I always need to stay in shape physically and mentally to deal with if this thing comes back.
Yeah.
So going into another sport was an obvious choice. But I'm also getting scans every 6 months of my life, and it became about managing those scans. So again, you go from high performance environment straight back into hospital environment.
Yeah.
So there's like this constant reminder of this pull between being an athlete, but also being a patient. And this was a language that was used quite often with me. They would say, well, you're a patient, then you're an athlete. And it's very easy then to identify as being the patient or being the athlete. And I was like, well, I need to move beyond this again. Who's David Smith? What's his values? What does he stand for? What's his strengths? Who is he as a person?
So would you say, again, obviously he's going to come up to the second tumour soon, which is you're having to continually reinvent your identity and remind yourself what your values need to be at that time, and they're
changing. Remember, this is not a fixed thing. So like goals, identity, philosophy can change from different decades and different months and challenges that you have. So it's about being agile and not being fixed minded and closed minded.
Yeah.
I often think if my mind is like a parachute, it only works if it's open. If not, you're going to hit the deck pretty hard. So I've constantly tried to kind of pride myself on that ability to be like a chameleon, almost adapt to the situations that are presented in front of me. And again, as long as I know that I've trained my mind, trained my body, trained my craft, whatever those things, then everything else will kind of look after itself, because I have the toolkit to be able to deal with what's coming my way. So, and again, inevitably, I said to myself, I could never go through all that again, the pain, the rehab, the cut open, all of that stuff.
And what happened?
And on the first day of the Commonwealth Games in 2014, I'd taken a train down to Oxford from Glasgow, walked in to be told that the tumour had come back and that they were going to have to go and do everything that they'd done the first time all over again. I sat in that seat and was just like, part of me was like, oh yeah, it was weird, because part of my, I guess, the inner narrative that was maybe deep in my subconscious was like, well, I knew this was going to happen. Yeah. And then there was another part of me going, oh wow, okay, wait a minute, I can do this. Like, I've been here before.
Yeah.
So uncertainty can breed anxiety. Yeah. But in the flip side of things, I knew what was coming, which was not so great, but I also knew that I'd done it before. So I'd had my own vicarious experience. I didn't need a vicarious. I've done this before. Yeah. So I was like, you know what? Like, I can get through this. Not only can I get through this, I can get through this and then be a world champion again. Yeah. So I was like, I know it's going to take discipline and hard work, but I've got that. Yeah. And I know when the chips are down that I can show up to every session, every day. Like, I know I can do the work. Yeah. And I feel like I've earned the right to be able to say, you know what, I've got mental toughness and the ability to get through this. But on the flip side, it's going to be hard. It's going to be emotional. It's going to break me and then rebuild me again. And I sat in the room again in shock, not sure what to ask. Still, there's no courses on this. Yeah. I leave the hospital. I leave the hospital room. I sit on the chair just to try and absorb what's happened. I look up at the TV, and it's the triathlon from Glasgow, and I just feel tears running down my eyes, because all I want to do is do sport. Yeah. That's it. And I don't want, I love moving my body. I love being an athlete, and I desperately want to have this life. Is this like, that's what I want to do with my life, and it's been taken away from me, and it's about to be taken again, and I don't want it to be taken, and I'm desperately trying to hold on, and it sucks, but I'm not asking why me, because why not me, but I'm sitting there thinking this really sucks. So I did what I did the first time. I went back to sport. I jumped on a train, went back to Glasgow. I did the whole time of the Commonwealth Games. I then went back to Aviemore to ride my bike. I had about a month between diagnoses to surgery because they had to plan for it. Every ride from that day of diagnosis, from the second time to surgery, was so special, because every time I went out on my bike, I was like, this could be the last time I ever ride. This could be the last time I ever see a hill, the heather.
So you didn't take anything for granted?
Nothing for granted, nothing. But it's crazy that it took a second diagnosis for me to go back to that mindset. And I'm like, wow, how do I bottle this and have this every day? Like, how do I wake up with, like, I guess as Marcus Aurelius would say in the Stoics philosophy, he says, how do I live every day like it's my last? And that's a hard thing to do, because you get pulled into the world of trying to achieve this, goals over here, this over here. Like, but when you're told for the second time, look, this is what's happening, potential paralysis from the neck down, you might die, there's all these different things out of your control, tumours crushing your spinal cord, you're like, wow, okay, I'm going to live where my feet are right now. Just even small conversations at the Tesco checkout mean so much more. It's like everything it's like the Limitless movie. Everything is like on overdrive. Your senses are like on, there's everything's coming in, and you want to stop time, but you can't stop time. Time almost starts speeding up. And it's a crazy environment. And then before you know it, you're stood at 7 o'clock in the morning outside the hospital doors, and you're just in reach of the sensor that the doors ping open. And at that point, you have a choice to put your foot, that next step is stepping from the world over here into the world that's where people are fighting for their life, where it's a really rugged environment where you don't want to be in that part. And there's that point there where, well, I guess you debate the whole choice of free will here, but in this instance, if you don't take that step, the tumour will grow and you will die. So you kind of have to take that step. But every cell in your body is telling you that you don't want to take that step. And you think of when Kirk was the young footballer and he gets to run, and that first time that your foot just hits the ground of the stadium, and then you're in this environment where you love it. Pressure is a privilege, remember. Here, pressure didn't feel like a privilege. As soon as I stepped over there, it was like, whoa, okay, this is real again. Before I knew it, I was in a hospital gown, back in the anaesthetic room, having the same thing all over again, to then waking up in a bed, feeling my parents kind of touching me. And I'm like, right, I can move all my limbs, fantastic. But I didn't have the strength to even sit up.
But with after that second one, that wasn't when the full paralysis. So, but
no, after
the second one, what was the outcome of the second one?
So the second one again was just like temporary paralysis. First goal, sit up.
So you had
second goal.
So you've had two operations where you've had temporary paralysis, and then again, how long after the recovery before you're back on the bike?
When I woke up from the second surgery, again, first thing before going in, I had to have a goal. So when I woke up, I was like, I'm going to cycle up Mont Ventoux 3 times in one day, which is for those that are not cyclists, is a famous climb used in the Tour de France, which is a mythical climb in France. And there's a club called the Club des Singles, which is the crazy club where people who cycle up it 3 times in one day. So I was like, from the minute I wake up in my bed and I can move my limbs, my goal is in 6 months' time to cycle up that mountain. I have to learn to sit up. I have to learn to stand again. I have to learn to just do the toilet again. All of this stuff have been cut from the back of my neck all the way down my back. Within 3 weeks, I was on a turbo trainer in a garage. Within 3 months, I was back on a bike. And within 6 months, I'd cycled up 1, 2, 3 times in one day, which was 140 kilometers and something like 5,000-6,000 meters of climbing. It was like 8-9 hours on the bike. 7 months, I was back in a British race suit racing in a World Cup time trial in Italy. And in that year, come to September, I was re-diagnosed again.
So that was the third time now?
That's the third time. So I'd literally gone high, low, back to, back onto the British team, back in a British race suit, racing, to then being sat back in a surgery in 2015 September to be told, look, your tumour has come back again.
This was the third time.
Third time.
And then how did the third...
So I remember leaving that and going back to, I was living in Manchester at the time, and just sitting crying in my room thinking, wow, I've been cut open 3 times now. I've had these 2 diagnoses. I've learned to walk twice. I've made it back. And I'm like, well, you know what? I just make it back. I'll just do it again.
And what about the paralysis at that point?
So the paralysis hadn't happened at that point. Again,
okay.
I still had full function of all my limbs. Mm-hmm. And...
what was your body weight roughly around that time?
I was cycling. Yes, I was cycling. So I was maybe 88 kilos.
Yeah. So what I'm saying, you still built yourself up to, good, strong.
Still built myself up. I was cycling. I was doing 20 hours a week on the bike. I was strong. I was fit. Uh-huh. Again, I was waking up every morning, putting both feet on the floor, jumping into my kit and out the door.
Yes.
Without even thinking about it.
Mm-hmm.
And in September 2015, they said, look, this is growing back, but there's room in there. There's no real rush to surgery, because
this was after the third.
This was the third diagnosis, but they said, look, we've got time.
Yeah.
So what you do with that time is entirely up to you. So I went to cycling. If we fast forward to 2016, we're going into a big year in sport. It's the Rio Games.
Yeah.
I'd spent a month in Spain training. I came home, had a scan, and from that scan, they're like, look, the tumour's grown to a stage now that we have to cut it out.
This is before Rio?
This is before, yeah. Okay. So this was March 2016. And they're like, we have to go in now to cut this out. It's got so big. Uh-huh. So again, I'm asking all these different questions, and they're like, surgery is the only option. We need to cut you through the front of the neck again, do X, Y, Z. So I went back to Manchester. I packed up my car. I parked my car in the velodrome, and I was like, well, going on past surgeries, I'll probably be out of the game for a few months, and then I'll make it back, and I'll get back on my bike, and I'll just do it. I'll do it again. I know I can do it, so I know what I need to do. Yes, it's going to be painful. Yeah, it's kind of going to suck. There's going to be highs. There's going to be lows. It's the whole human experience with the whole thing. But this was different. And I didn't know it was going to be different. And I remember being in London, and I'd went for dinner with a friend, and I remember saying to her, look, I'll see you in a few weeks' time. I'll be fine. I'll go get cut open and I'll be back. I got in a taxi in London to Oxford. The taxi driver was like, where are you going? I was hospital. I said, are you all right? I told him what was happening, and he was like, holy shit, man. I hope you're going to be okay. Mm-hmm. So I get into the hospital, and this is the power of the mind, Kirk. This is really super interesting stuff to unwrap. I put the hospital gown on. I get into my bed. Now, I had no symptoms. I felt super strong. I'd been riding my bike 2 weeks earlier with Mark Cavendish, Ed Clancy on the track. Yeah. I'm like, I need to go to the bathroom. I stand up and both legs give away, and I found myself lying on the floor. Okay. I'd gone from athlete to patient purely by just putting on the gown. So my mind, seeing all the hospital stuff, had taken me back. And here I am lying on the floor, and I'm like, wow, this mental stuff, this is really powerful. Hence the reason placebos are so powerful. Yeah. And I don't know if it was a sign of what was about to happen, or was it just the fact that mentally being in that environment was so powerful. And within 2 days, I'd gone through a 10-hour surgery, and I would never move again.
Fucking hell. So that was the trauma that just sort of turned everything upside down.
That was it. That was, and in many ways, I died that day. Because in that instance, from that anaesthetic going in, from that surgeon operating for 10 hours, to waking up in ICU, to never moving my left side again, that took everything from me that I loved. My skiing, my friends, running, it's like everything went. Just everything went. I'm lying in this hospital bed, unable to move. Everyone's telling me, don't worry, it's temporary, you'll recover. So I set 2 goals in ICU. I'm like, I'm going to ride for Great Britain again, I'm going to cycle across the Alps. That's going to be my 2 things, because up until now, I've always had these goals and they've always worked. They've always got me through. 8 weeks later, I'm still lying in the neurological ward looking at the roof. I've experienced all sorts of shit, people dying next to me, like horrendous hallucinations, everything. Coming to terms, like I'm going to move. I am going to move. And I worked relentlessly hard. I did everything, every goal. I literally was at max level, everything. If I was sleeping, it was max sleep. If I was rehabbing, it was max rehab. Everything was max. I became a sponge. I was downloading every audiobook I could find. I was learning everything about the mind, about psychology, about neurobiology, neuroscience, everything. I needed to understand what had happened to me. After 6 months, I'm still in hospital. I'd now been transferred to a spinal cord hospital where they're like, what's your goals? And I tell them, cycle across the Alps, ride for Great Britain. They're telling me,
you're mad.
Yeah, they're saying you need to just learn how to brush your teeth.
Okay.
The highlight of my day was getting my urine pots emptied and a bed bath and getting put into a fresh gown. I was in an environment that was very much focused on everything you cannot do. No one was telling me, like, you know what, you're going to be able to go and do all these things. Everyone was like, you're never going to walk again. You're never going to be able to do this again. You're never going to be able to do that again. You're going to never be able to tie your shoelaces again. All of this stuff, this negative, overwhelming negativity broke me. So I got out of hospital and I went to a private rehabilitation centre, which had a bit more of a positive philosophy around it. And I spent another 6 months there learning to walk. I never really walked again unaided. I needed a stick. I needed special support shorts. I needed special braces for my shoes. And this really hit me when I integrated back into society in 2017. Because now I'm a spinal cord injury, paralysed person. I'm disabled. If it's not such a powerful word that to say that someone, because I don't see myself as disabled, but this word is there and it's hanging over my head. All of a sudden, I'm lost control of my bowel, my bladder. I've lost sexual function completely. I've lost all these things. I've lost my independence, and I've also lost everything I love to do because of a decision made that I had no control over. And the worst thing about all of this was it didn't cure the tumour. The tumour was starting to grow back right away.
So this, after that third surgery, you wake up paralysed, and that still didn't clear
didn't clear it. So I'm now suicidal. So I'm now wanting to take my life because I'm thinking, I don't have a why. What's my purpose? I feel like I've died.
Well, your identity shattered.
Everything's shattered. I can't even tie my shoelaces. So I've gone from this athlete to now can't even tie my shoelaces. I'm a shadow of my former self. And wow, if there was ever a time to find meaning and purpose, it was now. So I'm reading Man's Search for Meaning. Viktor Frankl's talking about all these different things, and people that can find meaning in the harshest environments. You can still have purpose. You need to change your philosophy, so this all has to shift. It was super challenging, but I was forced to do the work. I was forced to do the inner work. And in many ways, that's what saved me, was that stuff. I was like, well, I can, I didn't achieve stuff academically that I did because I was doing my sport, but maybe now I can pursue a degree, a master's degree, which I went on to do in psychology and develop that side of myself and then help more people. But I still also had the 2 goals. And in 2017, I got back onto a bike.
So this was with the left side fully paralysed.
Fully paralysed. Raced for Great Britain. In 2018, I made it to the World Championships, fully paralysed on my left side. And I think I was only about a minute off the podium at the 2018 World Championship with 3-4 weeks of training.
Because
initially...
Sorry, guys, I'm not swearing a lot on this podcast, but on this one, I mean, I swear a lot anyway, but just... it's just, I'm sure if you're listening to this, it's fucking mind blowing. Do you know what I mean? This man from four tumours, taught yourself to walk 4 times, and you're 3 or 4 weeks on a bike, and you're at a World Championships.
Yeah, and
it's madness.
Because for me, I'm like, well, why not? Like, you know, I'm like this is kind of this is why. What else was I going to do? And again, I had that choice. I was like, well, I can, this for sure, this situation really sucks. But I think this is the benefit of growth mindset. It was like, well, it really sucks, but if I sit at home, it's going to suck a hell of a lot more.
Yeah.
Or I can actually just go out and try and live a flourishing life using the learnings from positive psychology, using the learnings from these wise people that I've kind of put as mentors of mine. What are they talking about? What are they reading? Take myself away from negativity, take myself away from toxic environments, from people who say you can't do this, you can't do that, and put people in my life that are like, well, yeah, show me how you're going to do it. Like, I don't, you know, like, okay, you want to ride a bike? Show me how it's done. Yeah. So I was in that environment, again, stepping out of my comfort zone. And from there, I found, I guess, solace on the bike. So I got back onto bike, got to the World Championships, came back from the World Championships, jumped into an MRI machine to be told your tumour is growing again. And I'm like, wow, this is like the 4th time. I can handle being paralysed now if I'm tumour free, because I've accepted that. Yeah. But now the tumour's just straight back again. It's like, oh. So I had one more goal, which was to cycle the Alps. I had to find, I guess, somebody crazy enough to take me, which I did, and I went and cycled I went and cycled 740 kilometers through 17 mountain passes from Geneva to Monaco in 7 days, with a tumor inside my spinal cord that would have rendered probably most people bedridden, and I was paralyzed, pretty much doing it with one leg. Yeah,
I mean, to give some context, guys, I mean, I've joked about this with David privately. I mean, I make no bones about it. I mean, a lot of my clients love the bike. I can't stand it. So I consider myself like a lifelong athlete to myself. And like the thought process of doing that for 7 days, strong, lean, both sides of my body working, like that traumatized me even thinking about it. So if you're listening to this, right, and one of the reasons obviously I wanted to bring David on is, and one of the reasons I'm so grateful he spoke at the last Built to Last event is one of my whys is to, you know, really help people become the person that they've always been capable of deep down. But so many people tell themselves such bullshit stories of why they can't do something, or make such bullshit excuses, and blame time, or, you know, previous physical failures. It could be from sport where you might not have been great at PE, or even just blaming life. If fucking David Smith MBE, Dr. David Smith MBE, right, can do that on a bike, like with a 4th tumor, anybody can. And David, like tell anybody listening to this, like, fucking hell, man, like, don't wait, do you know what I mean? Just don't cut all the bullshit and just fucking...
And I'm no different to anyone else, you know, like, I'm 2 eyes, 2 ears, you know, like, it's just, it's a mindset thing. Yeah. It's a massive mindset. And, you know, like, I've genetically not been given the best cards with the tumor, with the club foot and everything like that. But, you know, I've approached it with a mindset of like, well, I can do it, or I can't do it yet. Yet being the most powerful word.
Amazing.
There.
Amazing. So, please, anybody listening to this, please repeat that, mate. It's fucking gold. Any of my clients listening to this, please play this on repeat.
I can do it, or I can't do it yet. And mostly it's, I can do this. I can do this. And of course there's fear, like trying to cycle with just one leg and then going up climbs that are so steep that you know, you're going to fall over, all this sort of stuff. But I was like, there was no point where I was like, I ain't doing this. Like, I will do this, no matter how much I suffer. I had like holes in my legs from the saddle sores and everything. It was horrendous, but I got back, got it done, and came back to face surgery 5 and 6. So I rode the Alps, World Championships. I came back and I was standing in UCLH in London with my rucksack on, saying, hey, I'm Dave Smith, I'm checking in for surgery. And the lady looked up and she's like, well, you don't look like a patient. You don't look like there's anything wrong with you. And this is where, for me, it's been like so hard to almost accept that I have this thing growing in me, because at 44, I feel a pretty healthy, fit guy. And I've just cycled this Alps, and now I'm about to go and get cut open again. And I know what being cut open means. I know it means waking up in ICU, unable to move again, and having to rebuild all over again. And it was hard enough before, but now knowing about the paralysis, the full paralysis, I was like, whoa, this shit is real. Like this is really serious stuff. And again, I didn't want to say stupid shit out loud, so I'm not even going to say it now, but I was going into a rugged environment again. And again, you just go back in with the same mindset. I was cut open once, 5 hours. They got a huge chunk of the tumour taken, but they had to go back in the next day again. So there's surgery 5, surgery 6, wake up ICU. 2 weeks in ICU, fighting to open my eyes. The pain was excruciating. It was an horrendous experience. A week on the ward, then back home. Bike at the end of the bed. The only thing was like, I need to get back onto that bike. And now, I've had 6 surgeries now, paralysis. I'm back at ground zero again. All the work I'd put in from 2016 to now is gone. It's
how many times have you taught yourself to walk at that point?
That's 4 times now. This is the 4th. So I'm literally back at ground zero, like I was in Stoke Mandeville at the Spinal Cord Hospital. But this time I was on my own. I wasn't in the spinal hospital. I was like, I'll just do this on my own. So I was like, I just need to get to that bike. But I also knew that I needed to sleep and rest. So I wasn't going to go into this like a head case. It was all very calculated, all written down. I had plans written down. I had everything organized. And I approached every single day with a passion and a purpose attached to my philosophy and my vision, all this stuff. And it was all there written down. And I got back onto a bike. It was within a matter of months after the surgery, and I started riding again around one of the parks in London. Then before I knew it, I was ready to go and face radiotherapy. So the whole purpose of getting back fit then was to get the body ready for 6.5 weeks of radiation, which was going to be super intense. To then, after radiation, to getting back on the bike. With a list of goals to make it back onto the national team and race again.
And what happened then?
So radiation was tough. I'm not going to lie to you. That was an extremely hard thing to go through. But with it, there's light at the end of the tunnel. So it wasn't like going into something like I'm thinking this pain is never going to end. That would have been seriously hard. But I knew it was going to end. So I was like, well, I can just go through this right now, because I know there's an end in sight. And it was like I lost my voice. I couldn't speak. I couldn't swallow. Every time I swallowed, it felt like razor blades were cutting my neck open. It was so tough to get through. But I went to my breathing. I went to the mindfulness work, the spiritual side of it. And before I knew it, I was through it, and I was standing in Switzerland about to ride 100 kilometers on a bike over some of the toughest climbs in the Swiss Alps. And I remember doing that, and I think it took me like 8-9 hours. And I was like, this is insane to have come through all of that, and then just to ride 100 kilometers at the end of it all. I think that was the mindset that young David had in his karate days, that he learned when you get punched in the face, you get back up. And this is the thing, if you think about learning to walk, when you learn to walk as a baby, you fall over. What do? You get back up. You get back up.
Yeah.
And you learn that, but then what happens is that somehow gets taken away from you. and then you start, you lose that, but you're actually built with this resilience from day one, because when you're learning to walk as a baby,
you're doing it multiple times, you're falling over, but you don't have enough, maybe you don't have awareness of consequences and beliefs at that point. And
also you've not been, you're right, you've not been bombarded with all of this information that you can't do this, you can't do that. You just know as a baby, you walk, you fall down, you get back up, you go again, and you just keep doing that. And you've not been programmed with all of this negativity and limiting beliefs that you then take on to later life. And somehow I've managed to hold on to this belief that if you fall over, you just get back up. And ultimately, that there's no one going to lift you up. You have to do it yourself, and you have to want it. So it's attached to that philosophy, attached to that why. And where the old philosophy of David was to try and win a world title and win a medal, the new philosophy of now is living in the present moment, being where my feet are, and showing up to every day as Susan Davis way, show up every day with courage, compassion, and curiosity. And that's how I try to live my life now, with an awareness that what I'm doing, life is bigger than David Smith. It's bigger than Kirk Miller. And there's so much more that we can do as humans that is in it, to take away from a selfish thing about doing it for ourselves. We do it for other people, and ultimately this is what a lot of this conversation is today. It's sharing lived experiences to help other people through challenges, and I'm very clear on that philosophy now. In that sort of, I guess in many ways that's my purpose now. It's not David Smith the athlete. It's using everything that's happened and everything that I've gone through to be like to people who are maybe not going through such hardships, to say, hey, use this as your wake up call.
Yeah. So that's your mission now, sort of, if you look at, because we spoke, didn't we, prior to this, about the power of your story. I suppose is your mission now, like with your story, to just show anyone at any level that if you can achieve some of the things you have with some of the curveballs that you've had to face, that they can do the same.
Ultimately, I think for me it's that, I guess in many ways, that I've found a way to articulate my story that I don't feel is emotionally damaging to myself. So when I talk about what's happened to me, I talk about it a little bit in third person. You'll hear me say David this, David that. So there's like a separation, and also I don't focus on the negative parts of it. So it's not this. I don't want sympathy. I try to focus on, okay, what have I learned from this? What areas have I grown as a person? Like, what psychological readings, the mentors I've listened to, the books I've read, what have I learned from that stuff that then can be applied to any walk of life, whether you're a business person, an entrepreneur, a personal trainer, a celebrity, whatever you do, a sports person, whatever you do, what have I learned about facing mortality? Now, okay, when you talk about mortality, people don't want to talk about death. Death can be quite a scary thing for many people. No one wants to think they're going to die. But it's also, if you knew the day you were going to die, you would choose to live today very differently. Because we're great procrastinators as the humankind. We think we've got this limitless amount of time on Earth. We're going to be here for thousands and thousands of years. And actually, you blink and you're 40. It goes
as I know.
It goes
next year, mate. I get it.
So it goes quickly. And what I want to try and say to people is that, as Warren Buffett says, the only thing you can't get back is time. Time is the most important currency. And I know, where people are facing different challenges and stuff, and trying to put a roof over your head, and people are at all different levels on this thing that we know as life. We're all on different journeys, and each of us are on our own path within that. But I'm also thinking that, what has David learned from facing mortality that he can share to people that are maybe just struggling a little bit in life, to say, well, actually, these are the things that are really important, and these are the things that are not important. And I need to make some shifts and changes in my life that I can then try and live a more flourishing life, and you'd be surprised at what they are. It's not an accumulation of things. It's not buying the next sports car. It's not buying the next set of shoes. Things like acts of kindness, volunteer at a soup kitchen, volunteer at a children's hospital. Things that are not centered around yourself can actually bring you the most flourishing in life. And I think sometimes we try to chase this hedonic pleasure and we lack meaning and purpose in our life. And that's why you find people who maybe have this huge success or what they perceive as success, and then they're actually really struggling mentally because there's maybe no lack of meaning underneath what they're doing. They're just pursuing purely hedonic pleasure.
Yeah, I'll be happy when that next.
I'll be happy when. I'll be happy when.
I've done it. Okay.
Yeah, that person will never be fulfilled because they're chasing hedonic pleasure.
Yeah.
And hedonic, if we look at the studies of Aristotle, he says, to live a virtuous, meaningful life will help lead to a more flourishing life. That's living by your virtues, your values, having meaning in what you do. Things have, there's that. If I'm going to do something that actually has purpose and meaning to it, it's not purely for pleasure. Now, I'm not saying that we should avoid pleasure because pleasure is nice.
Of course.
But there needs to be, you need to live, I think, foundationally based on your values and virtues and have some form of meaning to your life and purpose to it that's greater than yourself. And then, then you can enjoy the pleasures of life as well. But if you're purely searching and trying to live on pleasure alone, you're going to live a very empty life. And ultimately, I've also come to peace with death. And I think that you can die a very dignified life, or you can die very angry and bitter and just, I had a very poignant thing happen during lockdown. I was part of a WhatsApp group that was about just learnings. There was a lady on the WhatsApp group who was dying of cancer, and she actually planned out her last few months, and she wrote her own eulogy. She wrote all these notes to us, and it was very powerful. She was quite young, but I was like, wow, that's like, I want to be like that. I want to be that. I want to be it that way. I don't want to be the person who is angry and bitter and shouting at everybody and, okay, they're scared. I understand it. But I was like, wow, this lady, she has done it so beautiful. She couldn't change the outcome.
No.
But she chose in those latter days to live it with her,
live it on her own terms. Live on her own terms.
And her values. And it was just, she just did it in such a very, very moving way that all of us were like on the group going, wow, like I want to be like you.
Yeah.
And then, can you imagine what the world would be like if people approached it with compassion, curiosity, and courage every day? Yeah. If we went out and if someone does something to us, before we respond, we have a level of compassion that says, well, I wonder what's going on in that person's life for them to be like that. Maybe they just need a hug. Maybe they just need someone to say, hey, man, like, here's a coffee.
Yeah, you don't know what they've been through, do you?
Don't know what they've been through. No. But we're so reactive and in so much of a rush that we don't often see the best of humanity. And I think at the core of it, I think humans are good people. I think the majority of us, okay, there is psychopaths out there, but I think the majority of us are good people, but we get sucked down by so much negativity that we just get swamped by it. And I think actually, what can you learn from somebody who's facing mortality and walking that line, and around the compassion that you gain from that and the insight you gain from that? I think that is so powerful, and to the point that it should almost be taught in schools. Okay, yeah, there is a curriculum. We all need to learn to read and write. But I think if we were actually teaching emotional intelligence at a young age.
Understanding yourself.
Yeah, understanding
yourself. And it all comes back to awareness, like you've said. And even from a coaching standpoint, all we're trying to do is improve awareness. And I've not got it all figured out. You've not got it all figured out. But if you're around good people who all have that mindset of how can I become a better person? How can I contribute more?
And who has got it all figured out?
Yeah,
like
but
nobody.
But at least if you know deep down you're trying to do things for the good of yourself and other people, you're going to win more than you lose.
And that's what I every day I try to think, okay, what can David do to just to be a better human being? Like, what can I learn? And like I make a point every morning when I have my coffee to put on a podcast or an audiobook and read something that's going to enrich me, that I'm going to learn from, and I'm going to sit there and be like, wow, that's fascinating. So then I can have a conversation with somebody who's willing to explore their beliefs, not defend their beliefs and shout and argue about it, but is willing to actually sit and be like, wow, what's your belief? Okay, well, this is my belief. Isn't that fascinating? How did you come to that reasoning of why do you think that? And just explore it. And, you know, where if you step out, sometimes everyone's arguing and shouting, and, you know, you see it with sometimes the leaders at Impact, they're all just arguing and no one's willing to sit down and just explore the beliefs. And I
explore
think
their beliefs, going like, could they be better? Are they serving you, or are they not serving you?
Exactly.
Are they helping you happy? Because ultimately the biggest metric in life is, are you happy? Are you healthy?
Yeah, and you know, and how good. So, you know, I always believe that you never often remember what people say, but you always remember how people made you feel.
100%.
And I always say to the young athletes and stuff that I work with, I'm like, okay, it's great that you want to go and achieve all this success. That's fantastic. That's your goals and that. But also be mindful of who the human is. You know, who are you as a human being? What do you want to be reminded as a human? Do you want people to say, oh yeah, he was a great athlete, but he was
a prick.
He was a dick. Yeah.
And
maybe you do. Maybe that's who you want to be.
Yeah.
And that's fine if that's who you want to be. But for me, I would always like to be like, well, you actually know what? Yeah, okay, Dave was actually a cool guy, and you know, he went out of his way to help me and make me feel good. And I think maybe I neglected that philosophy earlier in my career, and now I'm very much about, well, actually, you know what, I love making people feel good, and I really enjoy being in that environment where I can get the best out of people, and that's exactly how we
how we align. Because if you think about it, why obviously I resonate with David's story so much is so many of us attach our whole identity to what we do, and that's why for me so many sports stars struggle when they are no longer sports stars. I think it's why so many business owners struggle, because they attach their whole identity to their job. But like, yes, I'm like yourself, but you want to be successful, you want to be great at your sports, your lifting, your boxing, your football, whatever your thing is. But ultimately, you want to be remembered for a little bit more than that. And I think, you know, obviously the nature of what I'm trying to do with this podcast and my personal mission, and obviously I'm so grateful for you to have contributed towards that today, David, you know, with the event and hopefully many more times in the future is, you know, I think true high performers and people who are trying to do great things on this earth, they're trying to help people tick all the boxes, but be happy in the pursuit of ticking that box, whether it's financially, physically, mentally, spiritually, family values, all these different things. You know, there's no such thing as an end in any of these things, isn't it? You can always earn more money. Yeah. You can always be more ripped. You know, you can always, you know, have more things. But, you know, I think one thing we've both learned from our own journey is that, you know, me attaching the footballer thing, you know, that was always going to come to an end, whether it was at 20 or 35, if you actually made it to that next level. And I suppose even with your, you know, your career as an athlete, like at some point it pains us to say it, but you know,
we get old.
We get old, and it's like, so you've always got to be a bit about more than that.
And I think that's the importance of doing the work, of doing the inner work, of actually investing in that,
reevaluating values.
So you understand who you are. You don't have to become a psychologist or neuroscientist, but just to have an understanding of states, of how I shift from different states, and ultimately why I think the way I think, the way I act. And you can end your day and be like, you know, did I act with the way I actually, who I want to be? And
we've been congruent with who you are. I think we had some great conversations. I mean, I'll come to a close with this now, guys, because me and David could speak for hours, and hopefully you've took obscene value from this, and maybe we can pick up and talk again. But we spoke, didn't we, about energy and emotion being such a valuable feedback to whether you are actually on point and matching daily expectations. You know, your emotions, your energy, like, they don't just happen by chance, do they? You create those in some form or other. So, you know,
and again, it all comes back to your values. If you're living in a line with your values, and so if we unravel what values are a little bit, it's what matters to you, what's really important to you. If you're living in a line with them, then you're probably going to be doing okay. You know, and for me, one of my top ones is my health, and we both discussed this. Health is like, without your health, everything else is.
And it's fuck all about six packs, by the way.
No,
do you know what I mean? Like, me and Dave, most of my body, but believe me, because I've been the ripped guy that's been terribly insecure and fragile, and you probably exactly mentally unhealthy, 100%.
And so health is super important, and then that can, for me, connecting to nature, being in flow states, connecting with people, creativity, they're things that really, they're important to me, and they're very key values. So if I'm living by those values daily, and they're aligned with the goals that I want to hit, whether that's in sport or study or wherever it may be, then David's probably going to be doing okay. And whatever lies on the health front, he'll have the capacity to deal with that if he's presented with that. But if he's not living the life aligned with those values, then for sure he's going to first drop mentally. Your mental state has a change on your physiology. So then physiology, you're going to make yourself ill. There's actually, before we just sign off, there's a really great story on, if you've never read Trevor Mohad's book on getting to a neutral state, it's a great read. But he tells a story about a guy who was working in a fridge, and the fridge door got shut, the freezer got shut, and he thought he was dying because the temperature was so bad. So he started to write a journal about his death in the freezer, and he died. When they got the freezer open, it turned out the freezer was actually broken, and the temperature never changed in the freezer. It was his belief in his mind that actually caused his body, his cells to stop working. So what can we learn from that, and what can we take from that story, is that what you think and what you feel and what you put out to the world has a huge impact on your own physiology, but also all of the people around you. So be mindful of that.
And I suppose just as a takeaway, mate, because I know you spoke heavily about values, and one thing I've noticed throughout this podcast that has been so apparent in your story of why you've been able to push through all these different adversities is the importance of razor sharp clarity with your goals, your target, where you're trying to be, and actually getting emotionally and visually connected to that outcome, because that's going to take you through the hurdles, but also values. Are there any just like basic exercises? I think we spoke about it, didn't we, about you regularly review the 6 things that you value at different points, because they can change. What would be a great takeaway, would you say, for anyone listening?
So again, what I would do in the morning when you wake up, having that routine, connect to the body, connect to your breath, put both feet on the floor, say that you're grateful that you can put both feet on the floor, set an intention for the day, love it, go about your day, remind yourself daily, be where your feet are. Just say it, little cues. I went
down a storm, by the way. That's built to last. Be where your feet are.
Be where your feet are.
We forget sometimes.
When you get to the end of the night, just write down 3 things that went well. And that might sound so simple, but it actually has huge impact on the brain and the mind. And after 8 weeks of doing that as a routine, you will notice a huge shift in so much of your physiology. There's actually great evidence and data showing it actually does change the way the brain is firing. So if you can take anything away from all of our conversation, we could have just spoke for 10 seconds and just said, do that. But I think that there is, like, I live by that.
It's simple, and that takes a matter of minutes in the morning, minutes in the evening.
It's literally
and we're not the only people on the earth that sort of preach this stuff, but you can't be pissed off, stressed, angry, and grateful at the same time. It's impossible. Do you know what I mean? But David, I want to thank you, mate. Thank you so much. Like my personal takeaway, I mean, just like the Built to Last event where David spoke, the reason I wanted to bring David on was just my personal mission is to violate limiting beliefs in what people think they're capable of, and that comes from the pain of missing out as a footballer because I didn't believe in myself, and obviously come from the council estate and that small money mentality. But David has just took that and times that by 10. That no matter what curveballs in life you are faced with, we'd have a man here that's given up a couple of hours of his time to share some absolute gold, who has taught himself to walk. He's had to deal with so many emotional traumas, the identity shifts. And, you know, please come back to this episode if you ever doubt what you're truly capable of. Because I know my clients, I say it all the time to them now, you know, when they think they can't do something, I'm like, how would David Smith think? You know, what would he do now? What words would he say to himself? You know, and I just love that little one. My personal little takeaway was, what was it? You can't, I can't yet. Yeah. And that ties in with like one of my favorite Dr. Wayne Dyer quotes was, it's on its way. Because if you're listening to this and you say, I can't do something, and like if you think of David's thing of I can't yet, even if you never truly reach that goal or that target, I can't yet still gives you hope in the pursuit of that, and you're at least going to get pleasure in the process, because I think you might have touched upon this, David, so many times it's the anticipation of the goal that actually gives you more fulfillment than the actual goal itself. So that's just my takeaway. Just there's so much gold. Be where your feet are. I can't yet. And as I said, this, whether it's with me now as coaching, David now as a regular speaker, and he's got a book that's going to be out very, very soon. And we want to spread that like a storm, because I think so many people in life, in my opinion, get labelled inspirational, right? And I think that's dished out far too easy, in my opinion. And there's some great people out there, great athletes, great public figures, but I think it has to be earned, you know, to have true status to that. And even though David wouldn't say it himself, I'm sure you'll agree, listen to this, that this is genuinely inspirational to all of us, that the next time we want to fucking skip that gym session, be grateful you can actually do one. And reword that to I get to train rather than I have to train, right? Some people would, like, you know, literally give everything to do certain things. I'm sure David's one of them now with certain things, especially having achieved so much. But just be grateful that we have the opportunity to so many things, and focus on who you're trying to become, you know, and what you can give along the way. So thank you so much, David. I'm really, really grateful.
Thank you, Karen. It's been a great experience, a great journey, and be where your feet are.
Exactly. Thank you so much, guys. And as always, please leave your comments, biggest takeaways. Reach out to David. Do you want to share your social media handle as well, David?
Yeah, on Instagram it's David Smith MBE, and I'm also pretty active on LinkedIn. Yeah, just any site stuff, links,
that's it. David really. Smith MBE, and he is a wealth of knowledge, and even irrelevant to what he's been through physically, this man is even from a mindset perspective, some of the things he spoke about today is it's high performance. It's what top people do. It's just his story just adds 10 times more clout to that. So thank you so much for listening, and we'll see you next time.